Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carol Olson-Day of the New York Times, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this exciting TimesTalks, live here in New York at the Times Center and live around the world on the web. This is the first of 5 special conversations today, celebrating the 4th annual New York City Wine and Food Festival, benefiting Food Bank for New York City and Share Our Strength, and of which the Times is proud to be a sponsor. Our guest today is one of America's best-known chefs, cookbook authors, and cooking teachers. His series and companion cookbook, Jacques Pepin, More Fast Food My Way, debuted in 2008 and is a follow-up to his previous PBS series and cookbook. In 2004, he received France's highest civilian honor, the Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Since 1988, he has been Dean of Special Programs at the French Culinary Institute here in New York. You'll meet him in just a moment, but first, I'm so delighted to introduce our interviewer. He joined the New York Times a year ago as a dining reporter, after having written for many top magazines. He's also the author of the book, X Saves the World, and his work has been included in such anthologies as Best American Non-Required Reading, Best Food Writing, and Best Creative Nonfiction. Earlier this week, he wrote in the dining section about the foodie magician who haunts top restaurants in New York, eating and entertaining the customers. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Gordinier, and our very special guest, Jacques Pepin.
Thank you. Water.
Thanks for being here. Water.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, the real foodie magician.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I wanted to start by saying that earlier this year I got the chance to interview Gabrielle Hamilton from Prune, who's a best-selling author of Blood, Bones, and Butter. And when Gabrielle and I were talking, very soon in the conversation, she wanted to discuss who's the real deal in food, who are the real chefs, who are the real cooks, and it just kept coming back to Jacques Pepin. She kept saying over and over, he's the real deal.
Question of age.
And so I wanted to explore why. First, this is his new, it's sort of lifetime achievement, box set, 7 CD cookbook, Essential Pepin. And I wanted to focus first on one recipe for rillettes, which, as you know, is a delicious pork fat meat spread. It has 3 ingredients in this cookbook. It has pork, salt, and pepper. And yet, here are some of the things we learn in this recipe. When you are, when you are simmering the meat slowly for about 5 hours, you skim the foam from the liquid. You may have to add water during the cooking process because the fat will melt, and if the water evaporates too soon, the fat will get hot, and the meat will fry instead of poaching. We also learn that the next day, after you've cooled and stored the meat for a while, crush the pieces of meat between your thumbs and fingers to separate the fibers. This is best done by hand, but you can use a stand mixer with a flat beater. We also learn about the seasoning, which are just salt and pepper. It should be slightly over-seasoned since the seasonings will be muted when the spread is cold. And also we learn about when the mixture has set, work it with a wooden spatula for a few seconds to make it fluffier. Rillettes by Jacques Pepin. 3 ingredients, and yet it's those small gestures that make it work, that make it something special. So I wanted to talk to you about that. You've got 700 recipes in here, all those little details. How'd you remember it all?
Actually, that's an interesting recipe. I didn't remember it, but
I wanted to throw you a
Interesting that
curveball.
interesting that you choose it. Yes, actually, the fact, yeah, the fat breakdown clarified, and eventually, if you don't add water, it will the meat start crusting in the bottom too. And I do let it crust on the bottom too, which gives a slightly nutty taste to the rillette, which is better. So we use it this way too. I mean, the rillette, by definition, is a kind of pork spread and conventionally done with pork. And if you add rabbit with it, you call that rabbit rillette or other type of pheasant or whatever it may be. But the conventional way is just with pork. And it's pretty inexpensive, easy to do, quite good, fattening. But, you know, who want to die in good health?
Not I. There are recipes in here from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and whatever that last decade was, the aughts or whatever we called it.
Right.
And as I was reading in the introduction, you found yourself returning to recipes from the 50s or the 70s and adjusting them. And I found it interesting you pointed out that some were the recipes of a young man, some were the recipes of a man in middle age, and some were the recipes of an older man. What's the difference? Like, what kind of differences did you perceive in that way?
Well, it's very insidious, you know, but your palate do change, I mean, through the year, and certainly, and through what's going on in the food world. The excitement, and certainly for me, the amount of fat that we use, the time of cooking, and the type of fat that we use, all of that has changed through the year. And in a sense, you know, when I was faced with doing that book, we started with like 2,000 recipe. And I said, well, do I leave it? I said, it's going to be a cincher, just put it back together. And it wasn't, because I said, well, do I leave it to just show a moment in time, the way it was done? Or do I go one step further and try to make it so that it's usable and it's the way I feel like cooking today? And I went with the second option, which ended up being more work than probably doing a book, you know, from the beginning. But yes, things change. I mean, I have been here. I celebrated my 45th anniversary with my wife 2 weeks ago, and I've been here.
Congratulations.
You know, my wife, born in New York City from a Puerto Rican mother and a Cuban father, so I've been here. I came at the end of 1959, so it's 52 years almost. And even though my mother first time came when we got married, which was 1966, and even at that time she would taste my food. I was here 5 years, not that long, and she would say, "This is really good, but it's not French at all." You know, so
What happened to you?
I don't know what happened to me. I don't think that I'm very, I don't know, very chauvinistic this way. I never really trying to be French, really, but by the same token, I never really tried not to be French. I don't really think in those terms. I didn't know cilantro and many other type of seasoning that I use now. Now my wife, I do, you know, arroz con pollo or whatever I may do for her because of her background and my daughter and habit and what is going on, what has happened in the last half a century in this country, which is absolutely amazing in terms of food. So the food has progressed, but it's not like one day you get up and your food is different. As I say, it's a very insidious type of thing. And along with it, your age changing, your palate change, you feel like eating other things. As a young chef, you tend to put a lot on the plate, more of this, more of that, more of this. And as you get older, you kind of take away, take away, to be left with really a nice tomato, right the right temperature out of the garden, and a piece of meat or whatever. You know,
Right.
so.
But that elemental simplicity has always been part of your cooking. There's always been something really earthy and straightforward about it.
I guess that I stay French enough to still be pretty Cartesian. Yes. So I am, yes, Cartesian. I like to simplify. I do that. I teach at Boston University for the last 29 years and at the French Culinary Institute here over 25 years. And for me, the idea is always to take a recipe and make it simpler, simplify it, to try to get the, you know, it's like in the substantial moelle, you know, like in Rabelais, you know, the marrow, the inside of the marrow. I mean, the important part of it. And even looking at recipes that I did years ago, I said, why did I do that? I don't have to do that. You can
Like what one? What's an example?
For example, a spinach, as we used to poach the spinach, to separate the stem and the leaves, to keep the stem to use in a puree or in a soup, nothing was ever thrown out. Then you poach the leaf, you make bowl out of it, you press the juice out of it, and then when you have an order, you saute the leaf of spinach with nutmeg or whatever it is as a garnish too. And I saw that in one of the old recipes. I said, why would I do that? I just grab the leaves and put them in the skillet directly without poaching it. But we used to do that. So, you simplify, change. And I did that, I remember, with Julia. She said, you cannot do that. It's going to be bitter. I said, well, it won't be bitter. So maybe she was right.
In The Apprentice, your lovely memoir, which everyone should check out if you haven't, there's a point at which you say that imagination can be truly dangerous in the kitchen if the cook has little knowledge of technique and poor taste buds. You also talk about chefs, quote unquote, quote, succumbing to the temptations of over-experimenting. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, basically, we are not star. I mean, we are still soup merchant, what we do. And I am, what you want is to become a craftsman. When you work with your hand, you have to become a craftsman. That is, you have to know your trade in and out. I'm talking for a professional. Whether you're a cabinet maker, as my father was, or a jeweler, or a surgeon for that matter, or a sculptor, you work with your hands. So you have to know your trade in and out, in and out. And you can only know that by handless repetition. If you continue repeating and shopping and all that, this almost becomes part of your DNA. You acquire it, and now it's part of yourself. Now you can let it go because it will be there forever. Now you can think in terms of texture, in terms of color, in terms of combination of ingredients, because your hand automatically are going to do it. When you see a beginner cook, struggling slicing an onion, and you come and you say, do you have any parsley? Don't disturb me. So you're totally obnubilated, if you want, by that menial task, and you cannot move forward. So as a professional, first you have to become a craftsman. I have to say that I know a fair amount of chefs which are very good craftsmen. They run a restaurant, they have a good food course, the food is pretty good. They're not that great cook, but they still can do that as being a good craftsman. However, of course, if you have someone like Thomas Keller or a great chef like this, it's someone with a technician first, but then has talent. And if you acquire that technique in your hand, and if you happen to have talent, then you can take that talent somewhere, very far. And often, like in painting and all that, you say, well, you learn what you learn in art school, and then you reject the whole thing. Well, the process of rejecting entails that you have acquired it. Otherwise, there is nothing really to reject. So first, you become an artisan, a craftsman, and then you take it somewhere else if you have talent. But eventually, it will come back to you. We talked about that before, when young chefs tell me, what do you think I should do? I said, very easy, you just say yes to the chef, that's it. So you work with Daniel Boulou for 2 years and you say yes, because what you're trying to see is the vision of that chef through his eye, not your vision, not your idea of food, his vision. That's why you work with him. And then you leave and you do that with Thomas Keller or with, many other, Jean-Georges von Gerichen or whatever. And after you've done that 7-8 years, you have acquired an enormous amount of knowledge without even sometimes realizing it. And now it's the time to give it back. When you give it back, now you filter it through your sense of aesthetic, through your sense of taste. That's when you do your own food. Because you cannot escape yourself. At some point, it will be your own food, but it takes a while. Not at the beginning, after 3 months in the kitchen, you create a thing because you put a bowl of Roquefort with a slice of, or rather a slice of Roquefort with a bowl of raspberry ice cream on top. Wow! No one has ever thought of it. Probably a reason why no one has thought of it. So, that doesn't really mean anything to do those things unless they are controlled by technique, So, it's an oxymoron, but good cooking like that, it's control creation, So it is true, the control of the technique and then the talent if you have,
Well, you started as an apprentice in kitchens across France at 13 or 14, very young.
Yes, I was 13.
13, yes. One of my favorite stories from The Apprentice involves your being sent out to find a chicken boning machine. I was wondering if you could tell that story.
I mean, that was like in the army, you know, you have to pass a certain test. And of course, when I came, it was at the Grand Hôtel de l'Europe in Bourg-en-Bresse. I was 13 years old. There was another apprentice, but always play a trick on the new apprentice. And mine, you know, I saw a mixer, certain type of machinery that I've never seen before. So the chef told me, you got to go to Hôtel de France, another hotel, to pick up the machine to bone out the chicken. I said, yes, sir, fine. I had my bicycle, I jump on it, rush there. And he said, and you hurry up because I need you to, you know, the chef would talk to you this way. So I rush there and I get into the kitchen and get to the chef. I say, I'm the apprentice from the Hôtel de l'Europe. I want to pick up the machine. She said, I don't have your machine. I send it to L'Escargot, which is a small restaurant. They needed it. So here I go on the other side of town, getting to L'Escargot, and then to the Hotel Terminus. He sent me somewhere else. Finally, at the last place that I came after, I said, I'm going to get yelled at. You know, he said, there was a bag there, a brown bag, and he said, well, we just wash it, so you better watch out and not, you know, drop it or whatever. So, you know, puffing and all that, I carry that thing, turning around the little street, coming to the hotel, and here was on the sidewalk, you know, the chef, the commis, and then the waitresses, and all that. Well, a small hotel, all waiting for me. At that time, I had my desk, you know, I opened it, and of course, it was too large, cement block inside, you know, that I carried, so I had passed my first test.
Do you think that kind of hazing is, in a sense, important toward building a chef?
Probably was at the time. I don't know now. I mean, there is also a way of learning. Certainly at the French Culinary Institute here, we cater to the people. We show, we explain over and over again. And what they do in 6 months here, I'm amazed. I would never been able to do that in 3 years. However, I was 13 years old, and probably my hands were much faster than they are here because of that handless repetition. The point is that learning at that age, you tend to learn this way. You know, the chef tell you, do that, and you didn't even say why. If you had said why, he would have told you, because I just told you. That was about the end of the explanation. Then you did it, and maybe if he explained to you why, it probably would go here and come out there. You're 13 years old, it's a different way of learning. So you work, you repeat, you work. For a year before we were allowed to go to the stove, we were not allowed to go to the stove for a year. When I came to the stove was about that high, you know, burning my face. And then the chef one day told me, you. Until that time, I was called you. And then he called me by my name. When I work at the stove, he said, you start at the stove tomorrow. I said, me? I don't know how to do it. And I went to the stove and I knew how to do it through that type of osmosis, you know. So you learn through that type of osmosis by repeating too, which is a way of learning when you are that age, you know, different now.
One of the fascinating elements of your journey is that you cooked for a series of leaders of France, including Charles de Gaulle.
Right.
And yet, later, famously, turned down an offer to cook for the Kennedys in the White House. Instead,
and I'm a Democrat. Okay.
Said no to Camelot and yes to Hojo. Howard Johnson's.
Yeah, right.
Why? What? Any regrets there?
No, you have to realize the time, you know. I was with the president in France, 56 to 59, finished with de Gaulle. Of course, I dealt with Madame de Gaulle. You deal with the lady of the house. And, but I would do the menu with her at the beginning of the week, and if there was any state dinner, more important dinner than the protocol comes in, like when we serve, like I served like Eisenhower, Nehru, Tito, Macmillan, which were the head of state at the time. So at that time, the protocol would come in to discuss the menu with you, because it has to be a long menu or a short menu, very important, less important. You're not going to serve, I don't know, beef to the Prime Minister of India, or pig, you know, I mean pork to the King of Morocco, or one of those things, you know. So they tell you more or less what to do, and within that frame, you kind of choose your menu and work it out. Also the fact that the American president may have been invited already to 3 dinners. 3 times they had that fish and that fish, so you know, choose another fish and so forth. But certainly in those dinners, I never once saw anyone coming in the kitchen to say hello or say thank you. You were never invited in the dining room to get any kudo. Absolutely not. That didn't exist. The only time someone came into the kitchen, if something was wrong, and say, "What did you do there?" or whatever. Otherwise, never. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. This is the way it was. The cook at the time were really at the bottom of the social scale. Any good mother would have wanted her child to marry a lawyer or a doctor, but certainly not a cook. Of course, now we are genius, so I don't know what happened. But
And you're rock stars.
It was, yeah. So it was very, very different. So when I came to America, I was in New York. I worked at the Pavilion. And then when I was offered a job at the White House, Pierre Freinet went to Howard Johnson as the director of research, as the vice president. So he asked me to come. I was starting studying at Columbia. I was doing other things. So I did not want to leave New York right away. And also the fact that I had no idea of the potential for publicity at the White House because it did not exist. The chef we eventually went, which is a friend of mine, René Verdon, the woman, the cook who was there before was a black woman from the South. No one would ever have known her name or whatever. You know, it was totally anonymous as well. It was only when I think Mrs. Kennedy starting to push up her chef a little bit, and it started changing in the 60s. So yes, to validate my choice, I had no inkling or no idea of the potential for publicity or for doing this. And I had done that type of work already. But Howard Johnson, on the other hand, you know, it was mass production, it was the chemistry of food, it was American eating habits, totally different type of food. So it was a new world altogether. I would learn a lot there. And since, you know, I opened the World Trade Center in 1974, the commissary for the World Trade Center, the different tower. I was a consultant at the Russian Tea Room in the 80s. I opened a restaurant in New York in 1970 called La Potagerie on Fifth Avenue, large production. I would never have been able to do any of those jobs if I hadn't had the training I got at Howard Johnson in terms of being a professional chef, the training of production and all that. So that was a very good thing for me.
Mm-hmm. And a fascinating element of that is in The Apprentice, there are these scenes of you working with massive cauldrons of clam chowder, like
500 gallons, yes.
And yet, what was there's one scene I wanted you to talk about where you served a fish stew to Andre Soltner, was it?
Oh yes. We always did that with Pierre and all that. Howard D. Johnson, which was the father, different than Howard B., the son who came after the president. But the old man gave our free rein. I mean, we could do whatever we wanted. So, you know, I started doing beef burgundy out of the Pavilion. I did 3 pounds, 5 pounds in the test kitchen, then went to do 20 pounds, then adjusted eventually. We did 3,000 pounds at the time of beef here in 500-gallon kettle. But we had no one along the way. We kind of experiment ourselves. And each time we would do that, I would, you flash freeze it. At the time, we were a carousel type of freezer. We flash freeze at 60 degrees below zero. It was kind of new at the time, and we package, individual package to send to the restaurant. So I would bring them home, and each time I'd like André Soltner with the owner of Rutes, great French chef for me, or other great chef. I gave them frozen food. They didn't know it. I defrosted, gave them to them. I said, "What do you think?" They say, "Hey, that's good." That was frozen to say, "That's not what I did." I had a big kick at doing that. Yeah.
When you were coming up as a chef, you worked in so many kitchens, including the Plaza Athénée in Paris, as we talked, that hotel. Was there one kitchen that was the most pivotal for you?
Probably the Plaza Athénée in Paris, because I worked there quite a number of years, and very structured and very disciplined and very constricted in some way of learning. And you do learn this way, as we discussed that before too. The goal there was to conform. The goal there was to conform to the style of the house. That is, like the lobster Plaza Athénée, the lobster soufflé Plaza Athénée, which are the famous dishes there. We were 45 chefs in the kitchen. We were about 120 in the basement with everyone, but 45 professional chefs. I'm sure that 45 of us would have done that lobster soufflé without anyone knowing which one has done it. That was the idea, to conform to a style and to learn from that, as opposed to now often the young chef want to sign his dish to make sure that I'm the one who did it too. So there is a totally different approach to food now that we are famous. You know.
If you found yourself craving classic French food in the city this evening, where would you go?
Howard Johnson? Not there. I can always go, you know, it's not fair for me if I go to Le Cirque or Jean-Georges or any of the great restaurants. They don't make me pay and they give me the best, you know, so not fair. But
Why is that not fair?
But certainly, I mean, one of the best deals in the city is still the French Culinary Institute downtown, where I teach. We follow the structure in a modern way of classic French cooking, and it's still, I think we still do a 5-course dinner. I think it's $42, $43, so it's a very, very good price. So it's a nice way to do. And since it's students who cook, it has to be fresh twice a day, so you're sure it's fresh. The one who finish come at 7 o'clock in the morning, finish at 2 in the afternoon. Whatever come, the students who come at 3 until 10 at night, they cannot use whatever is left over. They have to start by peeling their carrot, doing the stew, browning the bone, because that's a class, you know. So it has to be fresh again, so that's good. The food is fresh, you know.
You participated in one event with Craig Claiborne, who's the legendary dining editor and food critic here at the Times, that wound up costing this newspaper quite a lot of money. I think Baccarat Crystal was involved.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, and it was on Gardener's Island, I believe?
Right.
I was wondering if you could tell that story, because it's horrifying.
It's another world. If I can plan a little more, before I came here at the Pavilion at the end of 1959, maybe 3 weeks, a month, 2 months later, Craig, who was the food critic and food editor of the New York Times, came to the Pavilion to do a piece on Pierre Freinet and on the Pavilion in general, and I became very friend with him, and I live on 50th and First Avenue, he lived on 53, so I saw him. He introduced me to Helen Macaulay, who was the food critic, the food editor of McCall, House Beautiful, and was quite well known at the time. And she was a friend of James Beard and spoke with James Beard on the telephone like 3 hours every day. And then in the spring of 1961, Helen told me, oh, I got that manuscript here from a woman who wrote a book here. Can you take a look at it? And I look at it, she said, I think it's very good. She said, well, the woman is coming next week to New York, let's cook from her. She said, she's a very big woman from California, she had a terrible voice. And of course, that was Julia Childs. So what I'm saying is that I was here 6-8 months, and I knew the trinity of cooking, you know, which is Craig Claiborne, James Beard, and Julia Childs. So the food world was very, very small compared to the way it is now. It's just amazing. And in that context, if you published a book at the time, there were a few books published every year. People at least look at it. I think last year there was like 2,800 cookbooks published in the US. So I mean, it's kind of overwhelming. You know,
Absolutely.
Totally. What was your question?
You dodged the part about losing money for the New York Times.
Oh, losing money for the New York Times. So we did those parties that Pierre Freinet organized, and we all organized, chef, on Gardener's Island. He became friend with the 16th Lord of the Manor, Robert Gardner, you know, so we could do on this. So we decided to do that incredible picnic, you know, with all the chefs. So I went there on Gardiner twice with Pierre, and I picked up driftwood, and we did a menu of driftwood, which was beautiful. Then Craig said we have to have starch napkin, tablecloths too, and of course, all kind of, we pick up big striped bass that we roasted, and all the food of the area. I pick up 100, I don't know how many pounds of blackberry there. We did a thing with it too. So it was great. It was René Verdon, at the White House, just started, Jean Verne, Roger Fessaguet, Pierre Freinet, and me, and so forth, Craig. So we're like a dozen chefs. And Craig said, we have to have champagne, of course, too. And he said, I'm going to go get Baccarat glass on 57th Street at Baccarat there, you know, for the champagne. So he went there.
Did you have to?
Yeah, absolutely. He went there and asked for Baccarat glass, and they said, no. He said, we borrow them to you and we'll bring them back. They said, no, even the president of the company, we don't loan Baccarat glass. Yeah, you have to pay the New York Times on that. You have to pay for it. And, but they say, he want 2,000. He said, if you don't damage them, we will give you the money back, considering that you have all those chefs and so forth. So he bought those 2,000 of glasses, and we took them to the island. We used them the whole day. We go back. I don't even think one was nicked. There was nothing. And I remember at night we finished, came back to cross with the little boat, you know, to bring back all the stuff from the island and all that. And it was like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. We're ready to go to bed, finishing cleaning, and I had to leave at 4 o'clock in the morning to go back to New York at Howard Johnson, you know, with Pierre. So we washed all those glasses and we put them on his counter. They were all there, the 24 of them. And during the night, he had an enormous fish platter hanging on the wall on top of the glass. So breathed on the fish platter, broke the hook, and they fall on the 24 glasses. So the New York Times paid for it. Right.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because you were talking about that meal and using the food from the surroundings there.
We were locavore already, see?
I know, exactly. That's what's so fascinating, reading your stuff and learning about you, is realizing that the whole farm-to-table philosophy that's in vogue right now, you're kind of ahead of the curve on that.
It's not ahead. I mean, my mother was an organic gardener, and my father was as well. Now, of course, they'd never heard the word organic in their life. The point is that chemical fertilizer did not exist. Fungicide, insecticide, pesticide, all that stuff did not exist 60 years ago. And if it had existed, it would have been too expensive. So, you know, we used, my brother and I, my father had made a thing. We used to go follow the horse and, or go to a farm to get cow manure or pork manure, and then we put it in the garden. He did his salad like that. So everyone was doing it this way. That's what the way it was. So everyone was organic.
That's right.
You know.
But like, there's a scene in The Apprentice that almost echoes the party you talked about, where you and your brothers, your little boys, and you went down to a brook and got, is it Viron? Viron? Is that the name of the fish?
Viron, yeah, right, yes. But that was those tiny, like, white bait in the sea, but those are in the river, the Viron and Goujon. And we used to pick them up like this, just with a piece of wood, a string, and a twisted needle, you know, that we pick up from my mother. Didn't even have any bait. You go there all over, they see the thing shiny. We pick them up by the tail too, and we press on the belly, you know, to empty them, otherwise the inside is kind of bitter. And then my younger brother, we took his undershirt here, brought some flour to mix those in, and a skillet and some oil, and we would fry that on the side of the river. At that time, I was about 8, my younger brother was like 5, and my older brother was like 9.
Oh, wow. So. Sounds delicious.
Oh, yes, it's delicious. Part of the tradition. I do that with my daughter and granddaughter. You saw that, but in Connecticut, where I live, we go with the net to pick up the little white bait, and it's actually that time of the year now. And we do the same thing, you know, press on the bellies and deep fry them like French fry. You know, those are really good.
Do you still do foraging for mushrooms and ramps and things?
I picked up 15 pounds of mushroom last week.
15 pounds?
Yes. Well, I would
Where?
say one of them was like 10, 12 pounds. It was a hand of the wood, big hand of the wood, and some other, you know. So.
Okay. What did you do with that?
Well, we had some for dinner, or I had some for dinner because my wife always waits just in case. And then after I cook
Give it a few minutes.
yes,
Just
cook the rest of it, put it in package, freeze them. We're going to have some for Thanksgiving. Claudine is coming. I'll probably do the stuffing with the mushroom and bread. You know, yes.
I can't wait. I'll be there. It'll be fantastic. We should talk a bit about television, of course, because as we all know, there's been an explosion in food television over the past 10, 15 years. And you were ahead of the curve on that as well. But what's interesting is that your TV career didn't necessarily start out easily. I mean, you sort of made various attempts, taped some sessions, and it didn't really take off right away, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I mean, I was invited to do one show or another, but to do a television series, at some point I was invited in Jacksonville, Florida, I think 1981, too. I did a book called Everyday Cooking, very simple food my mother used to do. And we did a series 13 show on television for some reason, 13.5-hour show. And after that, Julia told me, I'm not going to do television anymore. You should go see Bob Kotlowitz, I remember now, which was the program director at WNET. And he said, oh, yes, we're interested. We'd like to do something with you. And then I was already teaching at BU. I went to see the people at WGBH in Boston. Those are big stations. And they were interested too, but it's a question of raising money. It's still a question of raising money too. So after a year and a half, 2 years, nothing happened. So it went by the seaside, you know, and it never took off. And at some point in the 70s, probably, and 80s, I was doing 40 weeks of class a year all over the country in small cooking school, a week here, there, and a fair amount on the West Coast, like probably 8-10 weeks on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And I was giving classes there in Foster City at Martin Yan, with one of the first television star on television as well, at a cooking school there. So I was giving classes. And that week, he was doing a series at KQED or taping some show. And he told me, can you come with me? I said, I'd love to. He said, can you do a couple of shows with me? I said, you, sure, I'd love to. So we cooked together. I forget what I cooked. He cooked, and then after the executive producer asked me, would you be interested in doing a series with us? I said, no, I'd love to. So she said, fine, when can you do it? That was like at the end of the summer. I said, well, I cannot do it until like next June because I am booked in those cooking class like the whole year, except I don't book myself July, August. So she said, then we'll do it next July. She said, I'll have the money by Christmas. I said, terrific. And that was it. By Christmas, of course, she didn't have the money. She called me, she said, can you wait until the end of January? I said, yeah, I guess so. Can you wait until the end of February? I said, fine. Can you wait until the end of March? And then my wife told me, are we going to France this summer? I mean, you want to see your parents too? I said, yes. She said, well, are you doing that television show or not? I said, I don't know. It's like April now. And they asked me again, can you wait until beginning of April? And my wife said, well, don't you have to do the recipe for those things? I say, yes. And yes, that's true. So I say, you know, if you cannot get it by the 15th of April, even if you get it after, I won't be able to do it anyway, to do all the recipe, to have a lot of work to do. She said, fine, the 14th of April at night, they say, we have the money, it's a go. I said, oh my gosh, so we have to do the recipe. We taped that first series, was called Today's Gourmet, and the second series, Today's Gourmet, then the third series, Today's Gourmet, each of those 26 shows. Then after I decided to cook with Claudine, so we did Cooking with Claudine, and Encore with Claudine, 2 more series of 26 shows with her. Then I did Jacques Pepin Celebrate, another series again. I did basically all of my show, 12 series of 26 shows, including the last one out of that book, out of KQED in San Francisco. And the producer is here today. Where is she? Where is Tina? Here she is over there. She's terrific. Thank you. And Scott Walton, who is the marketing manager. So
when we were backstage,
thanks to them, because I mean, you know, again, it always amounts to raising money, and I'm not. Often people say, why aren't you the executive producer of your show? Like, I don't know, Lydia Bastianich or others are. I say, because they raise the money for me, and I basically do what I want. If I were the executive producer, I would have to raise money or do stuff which I have absolutely no idea of where to start. So I'd rather not do it.
That's interesting, because I was just going to ask, when we were backstage, when we were in the green room, I mentioned to you that watching your cooking shows is, I've always found it so restorative and calming, and I don't know that you saw that as a compliment. But
no, restorative and calming, yes. Okay, wake up.
But it is, your work on television has always been, and even more so now, such a sharp contrast to all the shouting and the game shows and stuff like that.
It's true. Someone told me the other day, or didn't tell me, I heard on television, someone was lecturing and said there is 562 shows on cookery in all the different television. I don't know whether it's an accurate number, but it's an amazing number. And you know, some of us do more cooking, some do less, but as I say again, you know, everyone loves that one, this one likes that one too, and that's, you know, I am who I am, and that's what I do, I cook, and I'm sure some people find it boring, and some like it, so that's great.
Now, we should talk about your wife, Gloria, because another great story I came across in The Apprentice is that she won a meatloaf cook-off herself.
Yes.
She managed to triumph in a unique way. There was a unique ingredient in her meatloaf. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Unique ingredient. It was Morley Safer was the judge. Morley from 60 Minutes. You know, he lived next to us in Connecticut. And one time I was on the road, and they did a competition of meatloaf, and Gloria won. Or she did. I knew she did a mixture of veal and beef or whatever she did. Onion, celery too. But a few months before, I did a dinner for a friend of mine who became Mr. Gourmet. And Mr. Gourmet, Dr. Schwartz, a friend of mine, a neurologist from San Francisco, a very dear friend of mine. And I went to the West Coast to do a special dinner. Julia was one of the guests too, and he wanted me to do like the lobster souffle of the Plaza Athénée, sweet bread too. So I did that special dinner for him because he was being intronized as Mr. Gourmet. And then he wanted to pay me, and of course, I said, no, of course not, you're a friend, you know, you cook. So he gave me that bottle of cognac, which was the bottom done by the woman. It was the woman thing. It was done in 1917 when the man went to war during the First World War. So it was a very, very special bottle of cognac with certificate of authenticity too. A shot of it cost like $400. She put like, I mean, a whole cup of my cognac in her meatloaf. When I came back, she said, I won. I said, oh, yes, that's good. Fine. What did you do? She said, I put some of that. She said, you did what? So I had my friend Jean-Claude at the house. There was that much left in the bottle. I said, we're going to finish it. That's it. We finished it.
The most expensive meatloaf ever made.
Right.
So it's fall now. What should we be cooking?
Whatever is in season, you know. I mean, I was at the market yesterday in Madison, Connecticut, where I live. You can all recognize my Yankee drawl, yes, Connecticut. And there is a small a farmer's market. So there was like 4 different types. I bought a thing that they call dinosaur quail yesterday. I mean, big one that I wanted to cook for my granddaughter. And then a little carrot came out, tiny zucchini came out of the field, some kohlrabi I had yesterday, beautiful pear just right now, beautiful peach just ripe also, as well as Italian plum. So, you know, when I go to the market, I kind of get crazy. This is a farmer's market. They come once a week and buying stuff. So all of those, you know, root vegetables are starting now. That's what we want to cook, you know. And, you know, soup for me is, you know, soup is always right. I mean, and soup is my way of using leftovers too, you know. What my wife calls fridge soup, whatever is there, we put in it. And it's true, you know, we have a soup, a salad, some cheese very often for dinner. And after 45 years of marriage, I don't remember one time that Gloria and I didn't sit down and have dinner and drink a bottle of wine, sometime two, you know. It depends because, you know, when I start cooking at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we open a bottle of white wine. By the time we eat at 7 o'clock, often that bottle is gone, so we have to move to a red one.
And you've been married for 45 years, yes? That's what you
Yes.
said? All right, there we go.
I know, I've learned that in 45 years, there is one thing that I can tell you, is that now if I have an argument with my wife, and if we don't agree, we do what she wants. But when we agree, we do what I want. It's fair, right?
I think Yoda said that originally.
Yeah. something like that.
It's funny when you're talking about wine because one of another fascinating thing about you is you're not really very fussy about wine. You're not like expecting that every glass you have is the finest pour ever.
No, certainly not. I actually don't like, the dinner. I mean, like 8, 10 dish with 10 different type of wine.
You don't?
That lost me. I like a white. Sometimes a glass of champagne, then a bottle of white, and a bottle of red, or maybe 2. But not like 15 different type of wine, having that each time to have to analyze, you have to go to work, you have to... I just want to drink it, So. and usually... And when you do one of those, I have nothing like tonight. I'm being honored tonight. There is a tribute dinner. And the Highness Prince of Luxembourg is the owner of Clarence Dillon wine, which have, Aubryon wine. So that's a great, great Bordeaux wine. And certainly I'm looking forward to have some of it. But I'm not really to have like a Aubryon, a Latour, 15 of those wine in the same dinner. No, having one great wine, then I can really taste it. Another wine, good wine, Côte d'Iron or whatever.
And your daughter works with wine now, right? That's sort of her specialty?
She did. When Claudine was 13 years old, she didn't know what she would do. She only knew she would never do what her parents are doing. So she went to school at Boston University, get a degree in political science and international relations, worked a couple of years in Boston for a travel agent, then went for her master in international relations, spent a year in Brussels with the defense, doing a paper on the defense of Europe, came back, married a chef, and started selling wine. This is the beauty of higher education. So that's it. Now we do class together, yes. And she was on my show, and here you saw the last picture with my granddaughter, Shori, and Claudine, yes. We did a fair amount of show together, yes.
And isn't Claudine occasionally aghast because you'll sometimes mix white and red wine together, just whatever's left over? And
yeah, I'm very good for, coupage. I mean, mixing. It's left over, we put it together. I have a friend of mine, Jean-Michel, with a sommelier. He gets absolutely berserk when I do that.
Oh, really?
And I say, what do you think that is? He looked at me very suspiciously, said, what did you do there, mixing? Well, it's only wine.
It seems like you have a thing about waste. You don't like things to go to waste. One of the recipes, I was on the train this morning coming into the city, and it struck me there was a recipe for involving pre-cooked, pieces of meat left over that you create meatballs out of. You sort of shred them up and...
Yes, I mean, for me, I go to a restaurant, I go to the French Culinary Institute downtown or at BU or any restaurant. The first thing I go to the garbage can and look what they have. I'm usually horrified, I mean, the stuff thrown out, we throw out so much, and of course, it's not part, I'm very miserly in the kitchen. I was raised during the war and all that. And the first 3 years of marriage that I had, I would do a thing over the weekend, a chicken, whatever, and then I go on the road for 2 days, come back, and the leftover of the chicken was in the back, and Gloria did something else in front. I said, why didn't you finish the chicken in the back? I mean, why? So we had those big arguments with that. Lasted probably a year and a half. After I came back, the last 43 years, everything is always clean when I come back. I don't know, you get rid of it before I arrive there. The beauty of it, as I said, I met Julia in 1960. At that time, she was totally unknown because she never wrote for a newspaper or magazine. She had never done a book, and she'd never done television. So, and she always kidded me, telling me that we started cooking together because she went to France in 1949. You saw the movie Julia started in 1949 when she goes to France and finished in 1961 when she published Mastering the Art of French Cooking. So I went into apprenticeship in 1949 as well. Of course, I was 13 years old, but the time, I think the movie was really absolutely terrific. The time in France, and Meryl Streep was amazing. She looked taller than Julia. I mean, I don't know how she did it. She was really, really amazing. But when we did the show together, we started by doing show at BU, as we cooked together at BU. and we did a series called Cooking in Concert, which was a 3-hour special for PBS to do in summer. And a couple of years later, we did another 3 hours special for the summer, again called Cooking in Concert. And then after that, we decided to do the series together. Well, we did the series a little bit like I did the last one, that is more thematically, rather than doing a menu as I do. Here it's more thematic. I do a series of soup, or a series on eggs, on a series on shellfish, or whatever it may be. That's what we did there. Say, let's decide to make stew or do whatever. Well, we were still arguing the day before we shoot about what we should do. Say, no, I don't think we should do that. Oh no, we're going to do that. And then she'll come in the morning. She say, I had dinner last night with my friend. I think we should do a roast of. I said, Julia, I already bought the stuff to find, so we went out. But the point is that we had no recipe. We had no recipe, so the cameraman were crazy, to the producer as well, because they really didn't know where we were going to go left, right, or where. And so we end up cooking together, and at the end of it, they edited it. Now, I have done series at KQED, as I said, the first 3 series, Today's Gourmet. You do a series of 30 minutes, and it's about 27 minutes, 28 minutes, the series itself. And they told me, you have to do it on time because, editing is expensive, did that too. So those first series I did on time, where people would come and say 10 minutes left, 8 minutes left, 5 minutes left, and you're finishing a thing, you have to look suave and nice, and then finishing it up, 30 seconds, wrap up, and so forth. When I did it with Claudine, I tell the producer, Tina, I say, I'm supposed to show her how to cook. If we have to, those signs, I'm showing her how to roll a dough, and that sign goes 3 minutes, I push the kid over, grab the dough, and, do it. Because, so they say, okay, fine, so, but, not too long, it's expensive, fine. All right. We do the show with Julia. Julia say, where we're going to cook. When it's finished, we'll tell you, okay? I think the longest show we did was almost 120 minutes, 160 minutes. It's not like 5 minutes left. There is an enormous amount of whatever that material is that we did, and when I see those shows, I'm amazed how smooth it is, because there was hundreds of minutes extra, that we did. and what happened is that when the show was done, in the can, as they say, it took 2 years, at least 2 years to come on the air, because the editor at Knuff, Random House, who did the book, they had to look at those shows ad nauseam for years to extrapolate the recipe, grab it and write it down what we were doing, because we didn't have any recipe. So it was a totally different process, But a very enjoyable process, because then there was no pressure, and we could do, and Julia was always very funny, and she never wanted to cater to the sponsor, And so one time there was Jeff Jackson who came. There was one of the sponsors, and Land O'Lakes. It's not like we didn't use butter. Land O'Lakes, and Jeff Jackson and his wife, Barbara Banky, with the owner of Cambria, and they called and they said, could we take you out for dinner? We want to come to talk about the show. I said, it's terrific. So they flew in, they had their own plane. So we drank a lot of wine, So before, after dinner, and we had all kind of wine from all over the world, in fact. They didn't, force us to use any wine that we didn't want to use. So we had some wine during the show too, and we finished, I forget exactly what we cooked that day, but the producer, Jeff Drummond told me, you have Jess Jackson, make sure. I say, yeah, we have beautiful Merlot, we have beautiful time of the world. So we finish cooking, and I tell Julia, okay, Julia, we're going to taste that. You want a little bit of Merlot, or you want some Cabernet with that? She said, I want beer. I said, what do you want? You want beer? I said, we don't have any beer. We have beer. She had beer underneath. She took beer. We had beer because the sponsor were there. Jesus. I said, we don't have to kowtow to the sponsor. We don't really have to antagonize them. And then the same thing when we did the president or whatever of Land O'Lakes came, and she used butter. Sometimes we put butter, and she said, let's put another stick in there. I said, that's too much. No, let's put, so fine. The day Land O'Lakes producer told me, what are you going to cook? I said, well, I'm doing a dough. General dough. I'm going to do a big apple tart with it. And then we have some chicken leftover from yesterday. I'm doing a chicken pot pie with the same dough to show. She said, great, because Julia said, I don't want to do a dough. So we are ready to start. And I said, I'm going to start. She said, I want to do my own dough. Okay, fine. So I start doing my dough. I roll, I do a tart, put it into the oven. And I said, now, Julia, I want to do their own dough. And she said, well, Jacques is going to do it, which was always like this. So, that wasn't rehearsed or anything. So I said, great. So she said, I want you to do it in a food processor. I said, terrific. So food processor, it's a good idea. I said, how much flour? 2 cups? 2 cups of flour. I said, a dash of salt, dash of sugar. I said, how much butter you want in it? She said, I want Crisco. I said, what do you mean? We don't have any Crisco. We have Crisco. Yeah. Crisco underneath, we did half Crisco, half butter, because I said, oh my God.
Well, I hate to bring this to a close. I would like to spend the entire afternoon and evening together, as I'm sure you would. But alas, as you know from the world of television, we have indeed run out of time. So yes. Jacques will be signing books.
Oh, yes, downstairs. So we don't have that book, which will be published in 2 weeks, but I have The Apprentice. I have some of the books.
Go for it. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.